Hey guys, welcome to the 11 Yanks channel. Today we have an interview with Tab Ramos, the first part of a two-part interview with Tab Ramos. If you don't know who Tab Ramos is, played 81 times for the U.S. men's national team, was a technical youth director for many, many years, was the assistant coach to Jurgen Klinsmann for a couple of years, and brought our U-20 team to the quarterfinals of an Under-20 World Cup 3 times consecutively. More recently, he's been the coach of the Houston Dynamo and Hartford Athletic. Currently helping out the New England Revolution as an assistant coach, but that is just temporary. He's a very interesting interview as somebody who's been involved with American soccer since the 80s as a player, as a coach, as a technical director, even a little bit as a pundit. So it was interesting to have him on and get his views on a lot of different things. In this first part, we talk more about his time as the under-20 coach, what that was like for him and how we were able to find success. Remember, he's coached a lot of our current generation when they were in the U-20 and U-17 setup, right? We talked about Jurgen Klinsmann and working with him and what that was like and his opinion about us not qualifying for the 2018 World Cup and Klinsmann's involvement in it. We also talked a little bit about the hiring of Greg Berhalter and Jay Berhalter's involvement with the Federation. So this is the first part. The next part will come out next week, but enjoy this first part, guys. Thank you for watching. Smash subscribe if you're new, and don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps me out. Please enjoy the interview with Tab Ramos. All right, guys, I am very excited to have Tab Ramos, former national team player, former national team assistant coach and U-20 head coach and technical director for the Federation, Houston Dynamo coach, Hartford Athletic coach. Tab, how are you doing? Super excited to have you on the channel.
Very good. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
No problem. You're one of those players that's, or people, I guess, that both as a player, as a coach, has been around in the American soccer scene since the 80s, right?
That's right. And you challenged me a little bit as to where have I been? How come I don't get on? And here I am. I'm on.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to have you. First thing I wanted to talk about, Tab, and I'll just say this. The most fun I've ever had watching any of our national teams, youth or senior, play soccer was watching your under-20 team at the 2019 under-20 World Cup where we beat France. And just the way that we were playing, the way that you had those guys keeping the ball, attacking, all of those things that we want American soccer to be. I wanted to start off really there, you took control of the program, the under-20 program, when Jurgen Klinsmann was in charge, and you were also the technical director for all of the youth teams. How did you get us playing that way?
Like anything, first you need good players. No coach can succeed and no team can succeed without good players. And we've been fortunate that I've been fortunate that I've been sort of on the sideline of how much our teams improved from 2011 until 2019 when I left, and that was purely not a reflection, obviously, on me as a coach, but more as our environment and how much players are able to improve nowadays in their own environments.
Yeah, it was, but I mean, definitely having those good players helped, but I'm sure at some level you had to give them the courage to go out and play because, it was a time in American soccer where we bunkered for our lives mostly, and watching those under-20 teams not do that, right, and actually have the confidence to go out there and play. I'm sure that, obviously there has to be that technical foundation, like you said, good players. But did it start with Jurgen Klinsmann when you were the assistant there, or was it just your kind of philosophy if you wanted to be the protagonist in a game?
I wanted our players to reflect who we are as a country. That to me was what was going to make sense. We've always been sort of a foot forward type of country and type of people. Always when you looked at the USA teams and in the Olympics or in any other competitions, we were always setting the standard. And yet in soccer, we were so far away. So I wanted to make sure that the way we played reflected how I felt like our players felt. at the time they put on the U.S. jersey, and I think we did that. I think we decided to put together a style of play with the youth national teams that was foot forward, high pressing, all out type of game, and a game that didn't change against any opponent. A game that we were going to go out and try to beat you regardless of the team we played against. And so as the years went on with the youth national teams, we went from thinking, hey, U20, when I took over the U20 national team in 2011, the under 20s had not qualified for the World Cup. And from then on, we went into from thinking, hey, we have to go to qualifying so that we can get to the World Cup. The message changed to, we're going to qualify to be CONCACAF champions. That's why we're going to qualify. And then that, as a reward, comes with going to the World Cup after, and we'll deal with that after. But the most important thing, as players who have played for me at the U20s will tell you, is that although we hadn't won a U20 championship in CONCACAF ever, the goal was to win the championship, not to qualify to the World Cup. And I think that started to change the mindset of the players.
Yeah, it's a mentality shift, wasn't it? Hearing you talk about being the protagonist and being, the way the U.S. is culturally, right? A team that wants to be on the front foot. Sounds a lot like what we heard from Jurgen Klinsmann when he took over the national team job in 2011. I know you were his assistant from 2014 to 2016, and there's a lot of mixed opinions about Jurgen, right, within American soccer circles. But he took us, the second round of the 2014 2014 World Cup, Copa America semifinalists. What was that like? You were his assistant. I think after the World Cup was when you were hired, right, through the Copa America?
I had been assisting Jurgen pretty much since he took over in 2011.
Okay.
So I went with Jurgen on his first trip as national team coach. So I was pretty much on and off with Jurgen the whole time. Of course, I had my duties with the under 20s that at times came first. But I was there pretty much the whole time, and I was really lucky because Jurgen is, and I do know that there's different opinions about Jurgen, but there's different opinions about everyone.
Yeah.
And in particular, when you're international royalty like Jurgen is, Jurgen is not just another guy. He's not just another international coach. He's one of the most decorated German players. He's done everything and became a coach, took the German team and changed their style of play in 2006. And, some of the German players were not happy with that, and some didn't like him, but that happens. I was very fortunate to live with that. And what Jurgen did is give our national teams the confidence to really just go and compete against anybody. And he opened doors all over the world. I mean, we traveled all over the world like royalty. Anytime Jurgen showed up somewhere, everybody knew who he was.
What were some of the things that you learned from Jurgen as a coach, whether that's X's and O's, the tactics of the game, or otherwise?
I think one of the things that was really interesting about Jurgen is the way he managed people, the way he managed the federation, the way he pushed the limits of the federation, and the way he managed the players. Because ultimately, what Jurgen wanted was, for us, let's say Andy Herzog and I, and at times Martin Vasquez, to design the training sessions, with his job being mostly that he wanted the players to be happy when they came. He wanted the players to find in the national team a home, a place where they would feel comfortable. And that's not easy for a coach, because most coaches will want to just only focus on the tactical area.
Yeah, one of the, I think, criticisms that's leveled at Jurgen Klinsmann during his time was that he was a great man manager and inspirationalist, but maybe the X's and O's of the game wasn't his strong point, right? And you could point to Jogi Löw with Germany, who did a lot of the tactics. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a fair criticism of Jurgen or not?
I wouldn't criticize any area of Jurgen Klinsmann. I think every coach is different. I think every coach manages their team differently. Some coaches are more tactical and go through their X's and O's and get their team on the field after putting their teams through patterns on what they're going to do every time they have the ball. And some coaches like more of a suggestive type of playing where this is how we're organized. We're playing, and I'm going to just say as an example, we're playing in a 4-4-2. When the ball goes here, we channel everybody that way. When we win the ball, we go immediately opposite side, or we attack the same side, or whatever it is. So you have some general points on how you play according to your opponent. And some, like I said, so there you can have, and then there's everything in between. Then there's coaches in between. But I mean, all coaches are different, and some are successful. But by the way, coaches are successful in different ways also.
Yeah, for sure. Once Jurgen, he got fired a few months after, taking us to a Copa America semifinal, losing only 2 games, right, against Mexico and Costa Rica, and then he was gone. Jurgen has since claimed that if he hadn't been fired, we would have qualified for that 2018 World Cup. Do you agree with him? And what was it like for you watching him get fired?
Well, it was difficult because obviously when you're an assistant coach, you believe in your head coach and you believe in your process that you put together. No one is obligating you to be there. So if you want to be there, it's because you believe in the process. We lost a really difficult game to Mexico at home on Marquez's header in Columbus, and that was hard to take because we had a poor first half in that game. We had a very good second half and still lost on one of our players not marking Marquez on that corner. But this happens. Then we went to Costa Rica, and unfortunately, we started the game with a great chance to take the lead, didn't take the lead, and then obviously the rest is history because once Costa Rica scored, the team sort of fell apart. Would we have qualified? I mean, I don't know. That's, to play the hypothetical game right now, it doesn't really get us anywhere. The fact is in the end, we still got to a winnable game and we didn't win it.
Right. That was a watershed moment for U.S. soccer, right? Not qualifying for the World Cup for the first time since, I think it's 1990. And according to some people, sparked a lot of change that was supposedly for the better. Certainly, when we didn't qualify, we were on the cusp of this golden generation that we have right now, a lot of which were in your under-20s at the time, from Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams, Pulisic, Richards, Dest, all of these guys. After the 2019 World Cup, after under-20 World Cup, after you had reached 3 consecutive World Cup quarterfinals, which I think now we think of as almost the expectation for the under-20s. But like you said, people forget we hadn't even qualified for the World Cup much before that. I think 2013 was our first time in a long time, the under-20 World Cup. You were let go by U.S. Soccer, or your contract expired and it wasn't renewed. Was there any?
No, it was actually neither one of those. I had 2 years remaining on my contract.
Oh, so they did fire you.
Yeah, so I wasn't let go, nor did they ask me to go, nor did I. I left.
You left. What made you?
I was in the starting the third year of a 4-year contract. So I had 2 full years remaining on my contract when I left.
Gotcha. Well, I did not know that. What made you want to leave?
I think the federation had changed a lot. If you remember, there was the whole, I was a youth technical director, but by 2000, the end of 2000 or the middle of 2018, I was already not part of the hiring of coaches. I felt like I was sort of pushed to the side and I was not part of being the actual youth technical director, which managed the youth national teams. I was already not in federation meetings with other organizations like, whether it's U.S. Youth Soccer, U.S. Club Soccer, all those organizations that I was always in contact with because we had reformed all of our youth development programs, including the way we played when we introduced rules to play out of the back and a lot of things that we did with a lot of the organizations. So I felt like, and at the time, they at U.S. Soccer started with the whole move to Chicago thing, which was only really, I think, to get rid of people. It wasn't really to get people to move to Chicago. And I felt like the environment at U.S. Soccer was very toxic. It was not a place for me to be, so I left.
You mentioned in the past that while you were the youth technical director, Jay Berhalter was essentially the acting technical director, and would get involved in technical decisions, and that was frustrating for you. Can you speak a little more to that?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure when I said that, but that's pretty accurate. To give you an example, when Raphael Wicki was hired to coach the under-17s, I didn't really know about it. And by the way, Raphael is a great coach, and so we were very lucky to have him. But it's not. He wasn't the profile of coach that I was bringing into the national teams. Or my profile of coach was, here we are, we're changing the mentality of the players, and I wanted former national team players to lead the way in each age group. I wanted the players to have an example of someone who had been there, done that. But that's not easy to find, because a lot of coaches, a lot of former players want to coach national teams, but I wanted to make sure I found coaches who were dedicated to the profession of being a coach and to dealing with the demands of being a coach and teaching the game, which is not easy. But I wanted that profile. That's what was important for me and for our youth national team players. And all of that changed without my knowledge.
So you were not at all involved with the hiring of youth coaches then, even though you were still technically the youth technical director?
No, because at that point they had already by I think around 2015, Dan Flynn had some heart issues. So really, Jay Berhalter kind of took over everything.
Yeah.
I even remember having a conversation at U.S. Soccer, because I had added in the past, we had never had a U16 national team or a U19 national team, and I felt like these two age groups were vital to the U17 and U20 groups. This is how we ended up. We added those age groups. They didn't allow me to have full-time coaches in those age groups because we didn't have the budget yet, but I was slowly making our program better. And this is where we found, by the way, a guy like McKinney, who we revived through the U19 national team. This is where we found other players who weren't quite ready for the U20s. We'd bring them to the U19s, and then they would go back to the U20s. And now we have something. Same with the U16s and 17s. So anyway, so at one point I remember saying, okay, now we got to take the next step. We have to have full-time coaches with every age group. And by the way, we have to start thinking about having full-time goalkeeper coaches, because the goalkeeping is the one thing that every coach will tell you, this is an area that I'm really not good at, that I'm not familiar with. We need a specialist to deal with this. And I remember at one point Jay Berhalter saying, well, if you're going to want, goalkeeper coaches, then, and here's a guy that was chief of commercial, whatever, at U.S. Soccer. So he's not technical. And he said to me at the meeting, why would you want goalkeeper coaches? Why would you not want forward coaches? That's what he said. And my answer at that point was, I do. I want forward coaches. I want midfielder coaches. I want defender coaches. But first, I want goalkeeper coaches, because we don't have any. And so these are the conversations that we're having, that I felt I should likely be having this conversation with someone on the technical side and not someone on the commercial side.
Right.
But then the decisions came, I think, directly from the commercial side. And then you could see that slowly, the youth national teams were slowly disappearing because of the move to Chicago thing, where, now, Dave Vanderberg was out, now John Hackworth was out, now all the guys that were managing the national teams were slowly starting to leave. And then you look around and you go, okay, well, Ernie Stewart is now the new technical director. He's not really having any meetings with me, but his family doesn't live in Chicago. Why do the other coaches' families have to live in Chicago if we're in Chicago? And we talked to U.S. Soccer at one point about, can we What about if the coaches continue to come to meetings in Chicago when you need them in Chicago? At the end of the day, there was nothing against Chicago. The
Yeah.
issue was, why live in Chicago if we don't have fields? So we need to be somewhere where we can actually all coaches collaborate together so that, let's say, when the U17s are together, all the coaches can collaborate and help. And when the U19s are together, we can all collaborate and help. And and all the players can know us, and we can all know them, and we can know who's coming up next. And that's what we needed. Obviously, we didn't have a facility, but also Chicago was not going to help. Sitting in an office in Chicago wasn't going to help us with any of that. So
yeah. Well, plus 6 months out of the year, you can't even be outdoors in Chicago.
Well, that's the other issue. But at that point, we didn't even get that far because we didn't even, because potentially you could say, okay, we're going to use this indoor facility or something, but it had nothing to do with actually the playing. So then I started with, okay, well, let's have a national team summit. What if we bring all of the youth national teams together to Florida, and there we have all the coaches together? So I started to do that, and then I had that one time, I think it was maybe 2018, we had our first youth national team summit. Something, correct me if I'm wrong, it might have been 17, but it was around that time. I said, let's have every 2 years, we'll have a youth national team summit in January, and we'll have all the coaches there, and we have every national team player there. How great would that be to have that message, not just from me, but from I made every national team coach speak to all of the players. So, like, if you played for a U15 national team, you knew now who was the U18 coach, who was the U17 coach. You kind of knew that the message was one. I made a presentation about our playing style all together, and I think we had a great thing going with the youth national teams. And I think, unfortunately, it wasn't going to continue that way. So it wasn't a place for me to be anymore.
Yeah. Speaking of Jay Berhalter, I mean, it's not a secret that he was basically running the federation while his brother, Greg, was hired to be the U.S. men's national team coach. And at the time, Greg's coaching resume was, being fired from the Swedish second division and 0 trophies in MLS with the Columbus Crew. What was your reaction to him getting hired while his brother was essentially running the federation?
No, I think my reaction doesn't matter. I think I lived through U.S. soccer through, the moments when everyone else got hired. So by the time I think Ernie came and Greg came, because I'm not sure if Ernie came before Greg or Greg came before Ernie. I'm not sure how that worked. But everyone else had already been hired, everyone that was around who could potentially make a decision on who was hired. So I know that, Jay and Ryan Mooney had traveled to Europe to bring guys like Nico Romain, like all of the coaching education people. Anyone that was anyone on the technical side had already been hired or had been replaced. And so, no, I mean, Greg, he came to the national team. It was, I don't really have a comment on that because I think all of the people who could have made a decision were already in place.
Gotcha. All right, so that was Tab Ramos, guys. Pay attention next week for part 2 of this interview, where we talk about youth development and where we're at with youth development in this country, where we still need to go to compete with the world's best. We talk more about Greg Berhalter and the U.S. men's national team, where they are right now, and whether or not this is a success or a failure for Greg Berhalter and the lack of progress right now with the team. We also talk about MLS, what the future looks like. We talk about pay to play. So do not forget to come back next week for part 2 of this interview with Tab. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great one. I'll see you on the weekend.